You are sitting at your desk on a Sunday afternoon, right? The house is completely quiet. You have a fresh cup of coffee, and you are feeling this absolute surge of unadulterated
Ah,
motivation.
yeah, the classic Sunday afternoon setup.
Exactly. So you pull out your planner. Or maybe you open up a pristine blank digital calendar
Right.
and you start architecting the perfect week. Like you color code your time blocks, you schedule a 5:30 a.m. wake up for a high intensity workout.
Early.
Yeah, and you block out 2 hours of deep, uninterrupted, focused work before your first meeting. You plan to cook this perfectly macro-balanced meal every single night, read 30 pages of a dense nonfiction book, and be in bed by 10:00 p.m.
It feels amazing to just write it all down, doesn't
It
it?
really does. You look at this beautiful color-coded grid, and society basically points at it and says, there it is. That is the blueprint of a successful human being. Just follow the lines.
Right. It is an incredibly seductive illusion. Because when you are sitting there on that Sunday looking at that grid, it feels like you have actually accomplished the things you merely wrote down.
Yes, you get the dopamine hit just from the planning.
Exactly. The plan is clean. It
Yeah.
is completely binary.
Yeah.
You are either on the path or you are off the path. It operates in this, perfect vacuum where friction simply does not exist.
But then Tuesday at 2:00 p.m. rolls around.
Reality hits.
Right. You didn't sleep well on Monday night because, I don't know, your neighbor's dog was barking. So you woke up late. You entirely skipped the 5:30 a.m. workout.
Which throws off the whole morning.
Completely. And then your inbox exploded with 3 separate crises before you even had breakfast, which completely destroyed your 2-hour deep work block.
Yeah, the grid is already falling apart.
It's in shambles. Now it's mid-afternoon. You are exhausted. Your beautiful calendar is just this mocking reminder of your failure, and the entire system has completely collapsed.
And what do you do in that moment?
You blame yourself. You don't blame the system. You tell yourself, I lack discipline. I'm lazy.
Which is, frankly, the ultimate tragedy of how we approach personal development. You step into the actual visceral world of human friction, and suddenly that beautiful blueprint is fundamentally broken.
Right.
We're looking at a navigational landscape that is honestly incredibly murky. And yet, we insist on using rigid tools to navigate fluid environments. We treat our life like brittle, static blueprints rather than dynamic, living systems.
Welcome to the deep dive. If you are listening to this, you are probably someone who loves optimizing, right? You love a good system. You want high-yield knowledge.
Absolutely.
But you also know that crushing realization when your perfectly designed system just shatters upon contact with reality. So today, our mission is to unpack something truly profound that addresses exactly why that happened.
It really gets to the core of the issue.
It does. We are looking at a text called Mathematics, specifically chapters U and V, which outline the mathematical architecture of human transformation.
Now, I know that phrase, mathematical architecture, might sound incredibly academic or dry or, even intimidating.
It sounds a little terrifying, honestly.
Yeah, I get that. But I promise you, what we are about to unpack is the most grounded, practical, and forgiving framework for living we have ever explored. It completely shifts the paradigm of why you fail and how you can actually succeed.
Okay, let's unpack this. The overarching concept the sources introduced today is something called a pseudo-algebraic concept mapping system.
That is a mouthful.
It really is. I want you to stick with me here, because while it sounds like a lot, it is essentially a structural language.
Right, it's a way of translating life into a visual format.
Exactly. It is a way to visualize the invisible psychological forces in your life. Things like your daily energy, your physical environment, your mental effort, your external support.
All those invisible variables.
Yeah, and it provides a real-time GPS to navigate how those forces interact dynamically.
By the time we wrap up this deep dive, you will understand how to write the actual algebra of your own life using what the text calls nested brackets.
Which is such a cool concept.
It's revolutionary. You will understand the crucial position of one, which completely defines your personal agency in any given situation.
Yeah.
And most importantly, you will learn how to stop forcing static maps onto a dynamic reality. You're going to learn how to read the actual terrain.
But before we can start mapping out that reality with math, we have to deeply understand the instrument we are actually using to navigate.
The hardware, so to speak.
Right. The text draws this incredibly sharp foundational distinction between a static map and a real-time GPS. And this is where we really need to look at the organ you are using to guide your decisions.
It is a vital distinction. If we connect this to the bigger picture, Most of us operate using our mind as a map.
Okay, explain that.
Well, a map, by definition, is a static document. Think about a paper map you keep in the glove box of your car.
Assuming anyone still has one of those.
Right, exactly. But imagine it. It was printed 3 years ago. It shows the ideal route from point A to point B. But it is an itinerary created in the past.
Right.
It has absolutely no idea what is happening on the ground today.
It's exactly like that Sunday planner. It is a map made yesterday by a past version of you who felt absolutely great, who had perfect intentionality, and who assumed zero friction would exist in the future.
Yes. The mind creates these maps because the mind craves certainty. It says, take Route 66, it is the most direct path.
But the map has absolutely no capacity to update when a storm hits Route 66.
Exactly. Doesn't know a bridge is washed out, it just stubbornly points at the line. And this is where the text introduces the physical body, not the conceptual mind, but the actual visceral, biological body, as the real-time GPS.
Let's really flesh out this analogy because it's so helpful. Think about the navigation app on your phone right now. You punch in a destination.
Like Google Maps or whatever.
Yeah. The app doesn't just look at the static road lines like a paper map would. It is aggregating thousands of data points in real time.
Millions, probably.
Right. It is processing traffic conditions, accidents ahead, sudden construction zones, weather patterns, temporary road closures.
It is feeling the reality of the terrain in the present moment.
And your body is doing all of that exact same processing constantly, every single millisecond, for your entire life.
But instead of processing traffic and weather, your bodily GPS is processing your physiological state.
So what kind of data is it aggregating?
It is measuring your energy levels, which is essentially your current fuel status. It is processing cortisol and adrenaline, which are your stress indicators, recognizing hazards detected in your environment.
Like spotting a traffic jam.
Exactly. It monitors your emotional climate, your muscular tension, the serotonin in your gut signals, your heart rate variability.
It is taking in massive, unfathomable amounts of data to give you an optimal route in this exact second.
It really is an incredible piece of machinery.
But the problem the text points out, and this is really the crux of why we fail at our plans, is that most people are so profoundly, chronically disconnected from their bodies that they cannot read these signals at all.
We just ignore the dashboard completely.
Yeah, we treat our bodies like a vehicle that just carries our brain from meeting to meeting.
Precisely. We try to force the static map, the rigid plan we made on Sunday, even when the GPS of our body is screaming, recalculating, due to a massive hazard in the road.
So, imagine waking up on that Tuesday. You are physically exhausted. Your stress is through the roof because of the emails. Your gut is tied in knots with anxiety.
Your bodily GPS is flashing red warning lights on the dashboard.
Right. But your mind looks at the static map and says, no, the itinerary clearly states we do a high-intensity central nervous system taxing workout right now. Push through it.
Which is a terrible idea mechanically.
Okay, wait, I have to push back here because this is where my alarm bells go off.
Let's hear it.
If I just follow my bodily impulses every time I feel a bit of friction, aren't I just giving up on my goals the second things get hard?
That's a very common fear.
I mean, honestly, my bodily GPS tells me to order takeout, lie on the couch, and watch 4 hours of television most nights. If my GPS says I'm tired, stay in bed, and I listen to it unconditionally, I am never going to achieve anything in my life. How is this not just an academic excuse for laziness?
That is the classic immediate fear everyone has when they hear this concept.
Wait.
We've been so deeply conditioned to believe that the body is lazy and the mind is disciplined.
Exactly. Mind over matter.
But the text offers a brilliant and necessary refrain here. You are confusing an impulse with navigation. The GPS does not oppose the destination. It opposes routes that will permanently damage the vehicle.
Okay, explain the mechanism of that, because that feels like a very fine line to walk.
Think about the navigation app again. If the app routes you away from a highway because there is a 10-car pileup, it hasn't canceled your destination.
Right.
It hasn't decided you shouldn't go to work. It is finding a side road that, while perhaps longer or windier, ensures you actually arrive in one piece. The GPS seeks what the text calls alignment.
Alignment, okay.
And alignment, according to mathematics, is the dynamic confluence of three distinct forces: self, reality, and force.
The text uses this phenomenal example of a mountain climber to illustrate this, and I want you to picture this scenario. The static map, the plan the climber made at base camp says, we reach the summit by noon on Tuesday.
A classic rigid plan.
Right. So the climber sets out, they are halfway up the face of the mountain, but suddenly an unpredicted massive blizzard rolls in.
So let's look at the three forces of alignment in that moment. First, Reality. Reality is not what the weather forecast said yesterday.
Right, reality is the blizzard.
Exactly. Reality is what is happening right now.
Yeah.
There is a storm, the rocks are slick with ice, the temperature has plummeted, and visibility is 0. That is reality.
Then you have the self. This is the body's GPS. The climber's body is saying, my core temperature is dropping dangerously low, my grip strength is failing because my muscles are freezing, my caloric energy is depleted.
Right. The GPS is saying, no summit is worth losing fingers to frostbite or falling to your death.
And finally, you have the force. In this context, force is the intuitive, directional flow of the moment, the momentum of the environment. The force says, the mountain is rejecting ascent today. The only viable movement is downward.
So true alignment is obeying all three of these simultaneously.
If that climber listens to their static mind, the mind says, but the map says we summit at noon. We told everyone on Instagram we would summit. If we turn back, we are failures.
And if they listen to the static map, they die.
Exactly. Listening to the GPS isn't taking the easy way out. Turning around and down climbing in a blizzard is incredibly difficult. Sometimes the aligned path is actually the hardest, most grueling path available, but it is about efficiency, survivability, and sustainability. It is not about ease.
What's fascinating here is the ideological difference between the two tools. The map says, arrive at any cost, even if you destroy the vehicle in the process.
Right.
The GPS says, arrive safely, sustainably, in a way that allows you to drive again tomorrow.
Well, that's such a good way to put it.
If your bodily GPS is telling you to lie on the couch and watch TV, it might be because you have driven the vehicle into the red line for 6 months straight without maintenance.
Oh.
And total immobilization is the only way the body can force you to repair the engine.
It's a completely different way of interpreting our own behavior. It removes so much of the guilt.
It really does.
But to actually listen to that GPS, to understand the nuanced route it's suggesting, instead of just defaulting to push harder or give up completely, we need a new vocabulary. We need a language to decode the terrain.
Which brings us to the core of today's deep dive, and really the architectural foundation of the text, Chapter U. Decoding the pseudo-algebraic concept mapping system.
I have to admit, when I first saw the phrase pseudo-algebraic, my brain initiated an immediate flight response.
Oh, I'm sure it did. Most people panic when they see the word algebra.
I thought I was back in high school math, staring at a chalkboard full of meaningless numbers. If you are someone who hates math, I need you to stay with me, because this is not about calculating numbers.
Not at all. It sounds intimidating, but the underlying logic is incredibly elegant and intuitive. Mathematics is not arithmetic. You are not crunching data to find a numerical answer.
Thank goodness.
Right. It is the use of mathematical structure to map the meaning, the context, and the relationships of the invisible forces in your life.
Okay, so how does that work if we aren't using numbers?
In traditional algebra, variables are numbers like 4 or 12 or 3.14. Here, variables are concepts.
They are the actual components of your human experience. Variables like effort, clarity, resistance, curiosity, fatigue, environment, support.
Exactly. And the mathematical operators, the plus, minus, multiply, and divide signs, are used to visually represent how those conceptual variables interact with each other in the real world.
Math is simply the most precise language we have for describing relationships.
Precisely. And human behavior is nothing but a massive series of relationships between our internal state and our external environment.
So let's break down the most foundational piece of this entire system, the fraction. The text calls the top and bottom of the fraction iterators and delineators.
So I want you to picture a standard fraction in your mind, just a horizontal line across the middle.
Okay, I have it.
The concept that sits on top of the line is the iterator.
The iterator, got it.
The iterator is the content. It is the active ingredient. It is what you are actually doing, feeling, or initiating in a given moment. It is the variable being acted upon.
And the concept that sits on the bottom of the line is the delineator.
Right. The delineator is the context. It is the filter. It is the physical, emotional, or social environment that is fundamentally shaping the action happening on top.
The text gives this perfect, crystalline example that made the whole system click for me. It is written as curiosity over support.
Let's dissect this because it's brilliant. Your curiosity, your raw desire to learn something new, the questions you are asking, the energy you are bringing to a subject, is the iterator on top.
That is the active content you are generating.
Exactly. But that curiosity does not exist in a vacuum. It is always, inevitably, filtered by the delineator on the bottom, which is the support available to you in that specific environment.
Support could be anything, right? Mentors, financial resources, a community of peers, or even just a quiet room to study in.
Yes, exactly. All of those represent the delineator.
So what does this all mean in practice for you? Let's say you are trying to learn a complex new skill. Maybe you want to learn machine learning and AI coding.
A great goal.
Yeah. Your curiosity, your iterator, is a 10 out of 10. You are highly motivated. But your denominator, your support, is a 0. You have no mentor, the online forums are incredibly toxic to beginners, and you are trying to learn at the kitchen table while your 3 kids are screaming.
So what happens to the math?
Your curiosity doesn't just evaporate, it gets filtered. It passes through that broken denominator, and it transforms into frustration.
Precisely. This is a law of the pseudo-algebraic system. The denominator always governs the numerator. Always.
That is such a huge statement.
It is. The environment shapes the expression of the action. If you have high curiosity, but a toxic or non-existent support denominator, the output of that equation inevitably equals burnout.
Because you cannot out-willpower a broken denominator.
Never. The environment will eventually exhaust the action.
Think about how radically this shifts your self-perception. Once you start seeing your life, your failures, and your struggles through this fraction, it removes so much of the toxic shame we carry.
It completely depersonalizes failure.
Right. If you fail at learning that coding language after 3 weeks, the static map of your mind tells you, I lack discipline, I'm not smart enough, I'm a quitter. You attack your own character.
But the pseudo-algebraic map shows you exactly where the mechanical breakdown occurred.
The denominator was broken. The environment failed the action. You didn't fail. Your support variable was at 0.
It gives you targeted precision for troubleshooting your life. Instead of trying to artificially inflate your curiosity or flog yourself with discipline.
Which is trying to fix the numerator.
Right. Instead of doing that, you step back and say, I need to fix the denominator. I need to hire a tutor. I need to go to a library. You fix the delineator, and the iterator naturally flourishes.
Okay, so that is the fraction. The environment filtering the action. But life isn't just one fraction. Things combine. And this is where the system uses operators to map psychological reality.
Let's look at the basic operators. First, we have the multiplication sign.
The asterisk.
Right. In this framework, multiplication represents synergistic amplification. The text gives the example of skill multiplied by practice.
Right, because skill and practice don't just add together in a linear way. If you have a high baseline talent for playing the piano and you multiply it by deliberate, focused practice, the result isn't just skill plus practice.
No, they synergize.
Exactly. The practice unlocks deeper layers of the skill, and the skill makes the practice more efficient. They amplify each other exponentially.
Then there is subtraction, which the text defines as strategic elimination. A prime example is creativity minus judgment.
This is so important for anyone doing creative work. Like, if you are trying to brainstorm or write a first draft or paint a canvas, you are generating the concept of creativity.
But if self-judgment is present in the equation, it chokes the creativity entirely.
So you explicitly write the equation as creativity minus judgment. You are stating architecturally that you are expressing creativity with self-judgment specifically, intentionally, and structurally removed from the environment for this phase of the work.
It's an active removal. Next is addition, which represents integrative synthesis. Two distinct things coming together to form a balanced whole.
The classic example is rest plus work.
Right. They don't amplify each other like multiplication and you aren't eliminating one. They simply complete each other to form a sustainable cycle.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Because mathematics doesn't just rely on standard math symbols. The text introduces a completely new proprietary operator to describe a very specific human phenomenon.
It is called the synthesis operator.
And visually, if you are imagining this, it is represented as a plus sign enclosed inside a circle.
The circle plus symbol.
I am obsessed with the symbol. It represents emergence. The text defines emergence as what happens when distinct elements combine to create something genuinely new, something that transcends the sum of its individual parts.
It's not just adding things together. It is a chemical reaction that creates a new element.
Let's look at a full, complex equation from the text to see how this synthesis operator binds different parts of our lives together. The abstract formula is A over B, synthesis operator C over D.
Okay, let's slow down and translate that. Literally translated, it reads, concept A, filtered by context B, organically integrated with concept C, filtered by context D, to create a new emergent reality.
It shows how multiple separate filtered relationships work together as a complete functioning system.
So let's build a real equation using the variables we've already discussed. Let's say you are trying to master that AI coding language again.
Okay, let's do it.
The equation for your success might look like this. Curiosity over support, synthesis operator, time over engageability.
Okay, I love this. You are seeing the whole architectural system of your learning process now. It is two distinct fractions combining to create an outcome.
Break it down for us.
So on the left side of the synthesis operator, you have your curiosity, filtered by the mentors and community available to you.
That's your first fraction.
Right. On the right side, working alongside it, you have the raw hours of time you have available, filtered by how inherently engaging the study material actually is.
Perfect. So if your learning is completely stalling out, you don't just sit there and guess what's wrong or blame yourself. You look at the mathematical equation of your reality.
Which quadrant is failing? Is the support denominator missing? Or maybe you have great mentors, but the engageability denominator is a zero, like the textbook you bought is so incredibly dry and boring that it makes the time numerator feel like torture.
It forces you to become an objective diagnostician of your own life. You are no longer the victim of mysterious motivational failures.
You are an engineer looking at a schematic, identifying the broken valve and fixing it.
It is brilliant. It takes all the emotion out of failure.
But what blew my mind even more digging into the sources is that this notation system isn't just some clever self-help gimmick the authors invented on a whiteboard.
No, the roots go much deeper.
They actually cross-referenced this entire pseudo-algebraic structure with formal linguistics. This mathematical notation fundamentally mirrors the deep architecture of how human beings generate language.
This is perhaps the most profound connection in the entire text. In the study of linguistics, specifically in the theories pioneered by scholars like Noam Chomsky, there was a concept called deep structure.
Okay, what is deep structure?
The premise is that beneath the surface of the words we speak, there is an invisible, universal grammatical architecture. Both formal linguistic theory and this pseudo-algebraic concept mapping build immensely complex meanings, from very simple foundational components through systematic combination rules.
The text specifically mentions generative rewrite rules. Now, for those of us who aren't tenured linguistics professors, how does a grammatical rule translate into human behavior?
Let's think about how a sentence is built. In linguistics, there are canonical rules for generating syntax. For example, a rule might state that a noun phrase can equal an optional determiner like the or a required noun like dog, and an optional prepositional phrase like in the yard.
Written out in linguistic shorthand, it looks like an equation. NP arrow parenthesis, det parenthesis, N parenthesis, PT parenthesis.
And the key detail there is the parentheses. The elements in the parentheses are optional modifiers.
Right.
The parentheses dictate that those specific elements can be present or absent without breaking the fundamental structural integrity of the phrase.
You must have the noun the dog for the phrase to exist.
Exactly. But the determiner and the prepositional phrase just add flavor and context.
Okay, so let's apply that exact linguistic rule to a real-world behavioral concept from the text. We can write a generative rewrite rule for a daily habit. Let's look at an effective workout.
Let's hear it.
The equation would be effective workout equals parenthesis, warm-up parenthesis, plus core exercise, plus parenthesis, cool down parenthesis, multiplied by consistency.
See how the linguistic architecture maps perfectly onto the physical behavior?
It's crazy.
The parentheses around warm-up and cool-down indicate that they are optional elements. You can completely skip them, and you still fundamentally have a workout because the core exercise, the required noun, is present.
But if you do include them, and you multiply that entire complex phrase by the variable of consistency, you generate a vastly more sophisticated, resilient, and effective physiological result.
It's the universal grammar of our behavior.
We are speaking our lives into existence using the same structural rules we use to speak English.
And the text goes even deeper into this connection with something called context-sensitive transformations.
This is where we see the immense, unavoidable power of the denominator. The environment rear its head again, isn't it?
Absolutely. In phonology, which is the study of how speech sounds are organized in the mind, there are rules that dictate how a sound changes. But those rules only apply in highly specific environments.
A sound literally transforms based on what letters are standing next to it.
Precisely. In mathematics, this linguistic phenomenon is translated into a behavioral equation written as base state arrow modified state forward slash triggering context.
Okay, my brain just hit a speed bump. You are going to have to translate that formula for me.
Sure, let's read it left to right. It means that your baseline psychological or behavioral state transforms, that's the arrow, into a completely new modified behavior only when it is placed over or filtered through a specific triggering context.
So the context triggers the transformation.
Exactly. The text gives an amazing concrete example of this in the workplace. The equation is individual focus arrow team focus forward slash collaborative environment.
Right. Imagine a software engineer. Their baseline state is individual focus. Put them in a cubicle with headphones on, and they will write code in isolation for 10 hours.
But when you take that exact same engineer and place them into the context, the denominator of highly collaborative, cross-functional environment like a whiteboard brainstorming session.
That baseline state automatically transforms into team focus.
Exactly. Another example the text uses is restful mind, arrow activated mind forward slash important deadline.
You are relaxed on a Saturday morning. Your baseline is restful. But the sudden realization that you have a massive presentation due on Monday morning acts as the triggering context.
The environment changes, and your mind instantaneously transforms from restful to highly activated.
This raises an important question for you as the listener. What is the practical takeaway here? Why does this linguistic math matter to your daily life?
It matters because it proves that you can literally predict, engineer, and manipulate your own behavior simply by changing the triggering context.
You change the denominator, and the numerator has to change to adapt to the grammar of the situation.
Yes, you stop trying to force the numerator to change through sheer, agonizing willpower.
If you want to study, stop sitting in your noisy living room trying to force your brain to focus. You are fighting the grammar of the environment.
Just shift the environment. Go to a silent library.
The library is the triggering context that will automatically transform your distracted mind into an activated, focused mind. It is elegant, structural, environmental design instead of moral failure.
But this naturally leads to a philosophical friction point.
Oh.
Yeah, think about it. If all these variables, these iterators and delineators, these baseline states and contexts, are constantly interacting, mutating, and transforming based on their environment.
Where do you fit into the equation?
Exactly.
Right. If I'm just a noun being modified by the prepositional phrases of my environment, am I just a victim of circumstance? Where is the human being in all this math? Where is free will?
That is probably the most critical question we can ask of this framework, and it leads us directly into segment 4 of our analysis, the concept of the unity operator, or the position of one.
In the vocabulary of mathematics, the number 1 is not used mathematically as a single unit. It is a symbol. It represents the position of self.
It is the focal agency inside any expression.
It is where your conscious choice, your executive function, actually lives within the equation.
When we construct our fractions, when we map out our reality, we have to place the one somewhere. And where we place it defines our entire power dynamic with the variables in our life.
The text outlines 2 primary configurations of agency. The first is configuration A, which is written as x over 1.
So the variable, whatever x happens to be, is the iterator on top. And 1, which represents me, my agency, is the delineator on the bottom.
Exactly. And remember our cardinal rule. The denominator always governs the numerator. The context filters the content.
So when you consciously write the equation of your life as x over 1, you are making it a profound declaration.
You are saying, I am the delineator. I shake the variable x. I have executive authority over the situation. I am the environment.
It is a high agency mode. I am actively managing the situation.
Let's ground this. If the variable x is my daily schedule, writing schedule over 1 means I am designing my schedule. I block out the time, set the priorities, I tell the calendar what matters. The schedule is subject to my gravity.
That makes sense. But then there is configuration B, which is the exact inverse. It is written as 1 over x.
1 over x. Here, you have placed yourself as the iterator on top, and the variable x is the delineator on the bottom.
You are saying, I am yielding to the variable. X is the environment, and it shapes me. I am subject to its gravity.
Using the same example, 1 over schedule means I am entirely yielding to the schedule. I wake up, the calendar tells me I have a meeting at 9 a.m., a call at 10 a.m., and a deadline at noon.
You don't argue with it.
Right. I don't try to redesign it. I just flow into those predefined slots and execute.
Now, neither of these configurations is inherently good or bad. You need both to function. But this raises the danger of severe imbalance.
The text introduces 2 distinct pathologies that occur when we get stuck in one configuration. The first is called responsive 1 over variable. abbreviated as R1V.
Let me paint a visceral picture of what a life trapped in R1V looks like, because we have all been there.
Oh, definitely.
If you are chronically stuck in R1V, the variables completely define your existence. Your email inbox is the denominator. Other people's artificial emergencies are the denominator. The news cycle is the denominator.
You wake up, and before your feet even hit the floor, you check your phone, and you are immediately subsumed into the numerator.
You spend 8 hours at work simply reacting to whatever fires the bottom line of the fraction demands you put out. Your mood is dictated entirely by external forces.
It is a recipe for total exhaustion, burnout, and ultimately a complete loss of self. You do not exist as an independent entity in an R1V state. You are purely a responsive reflex to the environment.
But on the flip side, there is an equally destructive pathology. The text calls it autonomous variable over 1, or AV1.
This is when you are permanently stuck in X over 1. You always demand to be the denominator. You are trying to forcefully dominate every single situation, every single relationship, every single project.
You never, ever yield.
Yeah.
You never listen to the feedback of the environment.
You become the ultimate control freak, and eventually you shatter.
Why do you shatter? Because you cannot control the weather. You cannot control the traffic. You cannot control the autonomous decisions of the people you manage or the spouse you live with.
When an AV1 personality encounters an unyielding variable, they break, because their entire identity is predicated on being the dominant denominator.
So if I'm hearing you right, if I stay in R1V, I become a doormat and lose my identity. If I stay in AV1, I become a tyrant and break against reality. How do we escape this trap?
Which is why the system introduces what I consider the most dynamic tool in the text, the inversion kick.
I love the visceral action of that phrase, the inversion kick.
It implies that you can't just forcefully dominate permanently, nor can you passively yield permanently. You need a structural mechanism to kick the equation over in real time.
Over the arc of any meaningful endeavor, you must alternate where you place the one. It is a rhythmic pulse.
Let's look at the life cycle of a creative project, like writing a book or coding a new app.
In the beginning, you must be the denominator. You design the environment, you establish the architecture of the code, you set the strict deadlines, you build the parameters.
That is firmly project over 1, you are in control.
But then, Tuesday at 2:00 p.m. hits, you sit down to actually write the code or write the chapter. If you stay in AV1, if you keep trying to aggressively control every single word from a top-down executive state, the work becomes rigid, lifeless, and agonizing.
You have writer's block. So what do? You execute the inversion kick. You consciously flip the equation to 1 over project.
You dive into the work, you surrender the executive control, you enter the flow state, and you let the creative process itself become the environment that shapes you. You become the iterator, responding to the demands of the art.
If you don't master the inversion kick, you develop severe cognitive tunnel vision. You either burn out from trying to brutally control everything in your life, or you drift aimlessly into mediocrity because you never take the reins and define the parameters.
The inversion kick is the rhythmic heartbeat of a sustainable, long-term life architecture. It is knowing exactly when to grip the steering wheel and exactly when to let the current take the boat.
Okay, so the position of 1 and the inversion kick give us immense power over handling a single relationship, a single project, or a single variable.
But let's be realistic. Human lives are exceptionally messy. They are massively, simultaneously complex.
Seriously, I am not just balancing one fraction. I am balancing my career fraction, my marriage fraction, my physical health fraction, my financial fraction, and my mental health fraction, all at the exact same time.
It's exhausting just listing them.
How do we manage the sheer, overwhelming volume of our entire lives without getting completely buried under an avalanche of pseudo-algebra?
That is the exact problem addressed by the visual architecture of complexity.
Yeah.
How do we nest these fractions together so they don't collapse?
The text uses different types of mathematical brackets to manage the different layers of our reality, organizing the chaos into digestible systems.
Yes, let's build the hierarchy. We start at the bottom with regular parentheses. In this notation system, parentheses represent simple grouping.
Like a discrete, localized relationship between two variables.
Exactly. Like parenthesis diet over willpower parenthesis. It is contained. It's just one tiny piece of your life.
Then we step up a level of complexity to square brackets. This represents mid-level nesting. You are layering a few different parenthetical concepts together to form a larger mechanism.
This might be a whole project at work, or a comprehensive daily routine that includes sleep, diet, and exercise. It is a machine with several moving parts.
But the highest level of the architecture, the most complex, responsive, and holistic layer, is represented by curly brackets.
The curly brackets,
Honestly, looking at equations with curly brackets always made me feel like I was reading advanced calculus.
they do look a bit intimidating.
But the text says they symbolize something incredibly powerful and deeply human, an evolving system that adapts responsively to varying conditions over time.
A curly bracket doesn't hold a static math problem. It holds a living ecosystem.
Let's look at the ultimate master-level example of this from the text, the GALS equation. This equation is written entirely inside curly brackets because it governs the entirety of your forward momentum in life.
Okay, I'm going to read this equation out loud, and then we are going to dissect it because it's completely shattered my understanding of how to achieve things.
Let's hear it.
The equation reads, curly bracket open, square bracket open, orientation parenthesis, target arrow, goal parenthesis, square bracket close, when aligned.
Okay.
Vertical pipe, which means or, square bracket open, reorientation protocol, square bracket close, when drift detected, curly bracket close.
Just look at the structural empathy of that equation. This single string of notation inherently recognizes the undeniable reality of the human experience.
It knows mathematically that you will not stay perfectly on track.
It does not demand perfection. It has a built-in mechanism for when you are aligned and an equally robust built-in mechanism for when you inevitably drift off course.
This completely shifted my perspective on ambition. In our culture, people think they need to constantly chase goals. We are chronically obsessed with goal setting.
Make a vision board. Set a SMART goal. Write it on your mirror.
But the text says something deeply counterintuitive. Goals are just nouns. They are static destinations. A noun cannot propel you forward.
They are simply endpoints waiting for you to arrive, a coordinate on a map. Saying, my goal is to be a millionaire does absolutely nothing to move your physical body closer to $1 million.
What actually moves you, according to the framework, are targets and orientation.
Let's define the difference because it is vital. A goal is the noun, the destination.
Right.
The target is the magnetic pull. It is the compass bearing. It is the specific direction you are facing. And orientation is the verb. Orientation is the daily, moment-by-moment, physical and mental practice of aiming your life toward that target.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of navigation, orientation happens in what the text calls differential moments, or DT.
Differential moments, I love that term.
These are the infinitesimally small, constant, daily adjustments you make. It is exactly like steering a massive ship across an ocean. You don't just set the ship's wheel once at the port in New York, lock it in place, and go to sleep expecting to hit London perfectly.
Right. If you lock the wheel and go to sleep, the ocean currents, the wind, the waves, the rotation of the earth, they will blow you hundreds of miles off course.
You are constantly, every single hour, micro-adjusting the wheel based on the feedback of the environment. That is orientation.
The text has this incredible line. Master orientation and goals emerge naturally as a systemic result.
You don't have to aggressively force the goal into existence.
You just have to relentlessly maintain the orientation, and the math guarantees you will collide with the goal eventually.
But inevitably, despite our absolute best efforts at orientation, despite our micro-adjustments, we experience severe drift.
A storm hits that is too strong for the rudder. A life event occurs that blows us completely out of the water.
Which brings us to the final and most practical section of our deep dive. Chapter 5, the 5 principles of dynamic navigation.
Okay, so I have my curly brackets set. I have my orientation. But let's be real, life happens. A family member gets sick. I lose my job unexpectedly. My entire industry gets disrupted by AI.
You are completely blown off the map.
Does this mathematical framework just collapse when massive drift happens? When our orientation fails, how do we correct our course in real time without having a total psychological meltdown?
The framework anticipates this entirely. The first step to correcting course is to accurately diagnose the specific type of drift you are experiencing.
You cannot fix the navigation if you don't know why the compass is spinning.
Exactly. The text highlights several insidious, very common ways we fall off our true path.
The first one that struck me right in the chest is social drift. This is when your orientation shifts, not toward what you actually internally want, but toward what others expect of you.
The gravitational pull of society becomes your delineator. The text explores this deeply. Think about the classic example of someone pursuing a career in law or medicine purely because their parents valued prestige.
They tell themselves it is the practical or responsible choice.
They spend 10 years studying, grinding, orienting themselves toward this massive goal. But underneath it all, they're aiming at their parents' target, not their own.
They drift because external validation feels significantly safer to the nervous system than internal congruence.
You wake up at 35, a successful lawyer, and realize you are driving someone else's car to a destination you absolutely hate.
That is social drift. Then there is deceptive drift. This one is brutal because it disguises itself as success. Deceptive drift is when you aim carefully. You persist through all the friction, you hit the target perfectly.
Only to realize it was the completely wrong target.
Why does this happen? Because we constantly conflate the means with the ends. Let's look at the psychology of this. You tell yourself, my deepest desire is to feel secure and safe.
Your mind, the static map says, the route to security is extreme wealth.
So, you spend 20 years aggressively chasing wealth, you hit the goal, you are a multimillionaire, but you realize you are more anxious, more paranoid, and less secure than ever.
The wealth didn't deliver the feeling because the target was misidentified from the very start.
The brain rewarded you with dopamine for hitting the financial milestone, but the bodily GPS feels entirely empty because the true need security was bypassed entirely.
And finally, there is fragmented drift. This happens when the different branches of your life, the different fractions you are trying to balance, start pulling in totally incompatible, diametrically opposed directions, causing absolute paralysis.
This is the modern human condition. You desperately want to advance to the executive level in your career, which functionally demands a 60-hour work week and constant travel.
But simultaneously, your deepest creative proclivity craves time for a solitary hobby, like writing a novel, which requires deep, uninterrupted focus and rest.
You cannot mathematically honor both variables within the limited denominator of a 24-hour day. So you fragment, you scatter your energy, you perform poorly at work, you write nothing of value, and you suffer from chronic, exhausting internal conflict.
So we've looked at the dashboard, we've identified the drift, we are off course, whether it's social, deceptive, or fragmented.
The static map is in pieces on the floor. What is the actual protocol?
The text provides a highly practical 5-step intervention for when plans inevitably change. It's called the recalculating practice.
And this practice leans entirely, 100%, on that bodily GPS we discussed at the very beginning of our deep dive. You cannot execute this protocol with the static mind.
Yeah, let's walk through this using a real-time example. Let's say you walk into work on a Tuesday, and you are unexpectedly laid off. Massive drift.
Massive. Step 1 of the protocol. Pause. Do not react. When the unexpected trauma happens, your mind will immediately try to forcefully fix it, or jam the original plan back together, or spiral into panic.
The protocol says, stop. Take 3 deep physiological breaths to reset the nervous system.
Step 2. Check the GPS. You ask yourself, what is the situation right now? Not what it should be, not what it was yesterday. What is it?
What is your actual energy level? What is your emotional state? Are you terrified? Are you secretly relieved? This is establishing your current location coordinate.
You cannot plot a new route if you lie to yourself about the coordinate you are starting from.
Step 3, confirm the destination.
Ah.
Is the surface goal that just got destroyed the same as your deeper goal?
Your surface goal was get a promotion at this specific company. That is gone. But what was the deeper goal? Was it financial stability? Was it doing impactful work?
Can you reach that deeper goal via a completely different route?
Which naturally leads into step 4, ask for route options. If you ask your anxious, panicked mind what to do, it will usually offer only one rigid, terrifying option like, take the very first job you find tomorrow, even if it's miserable.
But your body, your intuitive pattern-recognizing GPS, always has multiple options if you sit quietly and actually listen to the somatic feedback.
And finally, step 5, choose and move. Pick the aligned route, the route that honors yourself, the reality of the layoff, and the force of the moment. Take one single differential step in that direction and fundamentally trust the reroute.
What's truly fascinating here, the ultimate realization this practice brings, is that dynamic navigation is not about being passive.
It's really not.
It is the high art of strategic flexibility. You must know exactly why you are going somewhere, your deepest unbreakable target, while remaining endlessly, beautifully fluid on how you actually get there.
The static map of the mind screams, arrive at the destination at any cost, even if it breaks your spirit and destroys your health.
The real-time GPS of the body whispers, arrive safely, sustainably, and in a state of alignment.
It is a profound, life-altering paradigm shift. We are moving from the brittleness of overplanning to the unshakable resilience of being fully present in the terrain.
So what does this all mean? Let's bring all these mathematical and psychological threads together.
Over the last hour, we have completely deconstructed the way we approach our lives. We've moved away from treating our days like fragile, static blueprints that break at the first sign of friction to navigating them like a dynamic, highly intelligent GPS system that expects storms and adjusts accordingly.
We have learned to literally write the pseudo-algebraic code of our own existence. We can now look at our struggles not as moral failures, but as structural equations.
We can identify our iterators, the actions we're trying to take, and critically examine our delineators, the environments and contexts that are either supporting or suffocating those actions.
We explored the incredible power of the unity operator, consciously placing the 1 in our equations. We know the danger of being an R1V doormat to our inbox and the danger of being an AV1 tyrant to our reality.
We know when to be the autonomous force shaping our environment and when to execute the inversion kick and yield to the flow of the creative process.
And we saw how to wrap all of this beautiful, messy complexity in the curly brackets of a dynamic system.
We learned to stop chasing nouns, to stop treating goals as magic bullets, and instead to master our daily differential orientation, allowing our true targets to emerge naturally from the system we built.
You are the architect of your own meaning. These equations, these brackets, these fractions, these linguistic rewrite rules, they are just empty templates.
The map itself is completely hollow until you fill it. It is entirely up to you to fill in the variables with your own desires, your own unique constraints, and your own uncompromising truth.
It requires a level of radical honesty that most people avoid. You have to admit when your denominator is broken. But in exchange for that honesty, it offers you ultimate, unshakable agency.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. Something to chew on during your commute or your next walk. It is a concept that wasn't explicitly spelled out in the chapters today, but it echoes loudly through all the structural architecture we've explored.
We've spent an hour talking extensively about the dichotomy between the mind as the static map and the physical body as the real-time intuitive GPS.
But if your mind is just the map sitting in the glove box, and your body is the GPS hardware processing the data, who or what is the satellite orbiting above, transmitting the signal that connects them both?
That is a phenomenal question. What is the awareness that gets to observe the map and the GPS simultaneously?
Exactly. Next time you feel the overwhelming urge to force a broken Tuesday afternoon plan through sheer willpower, take a deep breath, step back into that awareness and ask yourself, are you actually driving the vehicle, or are you just yelling at the dashboard?